too many hard copies. Okay, yep. All right, so it's 7 o'clock, so we'll get started, and I'll start with the statement of acknowledgement. We'd like to acknowledge this land that we meet on today as the traditional lands for the Kaurna people, and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Greater Adelaide region, and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. Okay, item 2 is the attendance record. 2.1 is the roll call. We're all here except for an apology by Mayor Redman. 2.3 is motions to leave a grant of absence. None noted. 2.4 is a leave of absence. None noted. And 2.5 is non-attendance. None noted. All right. Item 3 is the declarations of interest. Is there any conflict of interest anyone needs to declare? No, all good. Item 4 is the confirmation of the minutes from the last Audit and Risk Committee meeting on the 7th of May 2024. Christine, you weren't here, so I've got, someone, you can still move them. Have I got a mover? Peter will move it, a seconder. Christine will second it. All in favour? Carried. And item 5 is business arising from the minutes. Is there any business arising from those minutes? None noted. Okay. All right, so we'll move on. Christine?
I'd like to move a motion that item 7.1, internal audit work plan update, be brought forward in the agenda and considered out of sequence.
All right, I'm happy to move that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Shanks, all in favour? Carried unanimously. So we'll go straight to item 7.1. And lucky we have David and Delju on the line. Hang on, so if I just go to... So for the 7.1, the internal audit work plan update, the officer's recommendation is that the Audit and Risk Committee receives and notes the internal audit work plan update report. Sharon, did you want to speak to that?
Thanks, through the chair. So I'll take the report as read. So as I said, we've got Dongju and David Papa on Zoom if you want to ask any questions in relation to the SCOSA readiness order. We did talk about this at the last meeting in May, however we didn't actually have the final report. So now we're actually presenting the final report with the management responses. So it was a summary of the findings was considered by council, was presented to council as an information report just because of the, I suppose, the timing of the receipt of the report and the subject matter, because SCOSA will be here in September, which is not far away. So that's really, so from a work plan update. So we also did the sales, service and revenue process review. So that was arising out of the new point of sale system that was actually put at the sports centre and the swimming centre. So that while the main body of the review has been completed, we're still working through the interim report and the findings, so that will actually be presented at the next audit meeting. Other than that, I'll probably just hand it over to you, or whether we want to hand it over to Dongju and David as to whether they have any comments that they want to add or raise in relation to the SCOSA review.
Yep. David or Dongju, did you want to comment on the work that you performed?
Yeah, I can do. Thank you. I'll keep it quite succinct and happy to field questions accordingly. But ultimately, our review comes down to a few key themes. And I think those themes are really what I want to just draw out for you. No doubt you can see them, but just for completeness. there are comments in regards to cost reduction or, maybe potential sale or disposal of assets, which got me thinking very quickly. It comes down to what's the service level appetite of the council, because that needs to be quite well considered as to where you can and can't pull levers. The currency and quality of some of the key data underpinning your decision-making documents was another key theme that really stood out. More specifically, when you look at your IAMs and you've got information within those key decision documents and information documents that is, in some cases, over 10 years old, but for a large portfolio, 2 or 3 years old in the current environment with considerably escalated construction costs, you could be massively underestimating your renewal program. And so there could be knock-on effects of sustainability there if you're under budgeting, so to speak, and you could be underrating as well, which could have that flow-on effect to that whole sustainability argument. Because, as we all know, increase in construction is an increase in your renewals. On that renewal front as well, just looking at last year, and it's always hard in local government because it can be a bit lumpy when you look at the new and renewal ratio. That's another one of the themes that we sort of thought of and saw through the review. The weighting of new was generally quite high. When you look at your financials for the last few years, the Note 7 split between new and renewal is quite important when we are looking at sustainability. And for 23, as an example, it's about 5 million was spent on renewal and about 8 million was on new. And if you look at your depreciation, which is your provisioning for renewal, that was about 8 million. So arguably, if 8 million was provisioned through depreciation and 8 million is spent on new and 5 million on renewal, potentially you're underdoing your renewal program compared to your new. So that's where, again, that information needs to be considered with the go, no go of new projects by the council. I appreciate that was a 1 year snapshot, but if you look over time, it'll trend no doubt very similar, and it's not inconsistent with what we're seeing in other councils as well, but it's certainly a call out for that focus on your renewal program. Really, they're the main themes I wanted to call upon, and certainly, happy just to talk in detail further with the committee.
Thanks, David. Are there any questions for David? Peter?
Just a comment. I think the point you make about the understating of the renewal task, given the cost of contractual services and things at the moment, is becoming a very big issue from a lot of the places I see. So I certainly concur with your thoughts about what will be difficult times ahead in terms of setting budgets when we see those renewal costs revised and come through. So just support that point you've made. It was a good report, by the way. I enjoyed reading that.
Yep. Thanks, Peter. Yep. Sharon.
Through the chair, I just thought it's probably pertinent to actually add a comment in relation to, I suppose, our response to the report. And I think that the report didn't actually tell us anything that we didn't know, which is good, and from that perspective. And it was from my perspective, it was actually quite good to sit there and say, okay, well, we are across. Having that independent assessment to sit there and say that we realistically understand where we're at this point in time, and we know that the actions that we've been taking probably over the last 12 months are focusing our energies on the areas that we actually should be focused on. So that was actually reassuring from my perspective. Wendy and I have had multiple conversations in relation to, from an asset management perspective, and the interrelationship with the long-term financial plan, and what we actually need to do to position that the information that is contained in those reports is actually, I suppose, has some currency. And just from the plan going from this point forward is that so just because of timing of the audit committee, and we are open if you want to actually have another special audit committee. But Wendy's been working on the asset management plans. We did hope to have the building asset management plan available tonight. However, that we are actually having some issues with respect to the delivery of that from the external provider's perspective. But we've sort of worked out to sit there and say, so having that long-term financial plan and the asset management plans ready to go to consultation or ready to go to council for endorsement for consultation at the September council meeting. And then we'll actually bring it back to the audit committee after the consultation process for comment and hopefully endorsement and recommendation to the council for adoption in November. So that's how we're actually addressing that. And then obviously the feedback that we've actually got here provided to in preparation for a SCOSA, and that hopefully sort of sits in well with this SCOSA review as well, that the documents and that information that we can provide to a SCOSA is progressed far enough that it's actually only going to be tweaking rather than us having to rely on providing old information and outdated information, which won't necessarily go well for us, because we don't want to actually put forward a 10-year-old business building asset management plan, or even a 5-year-old transport and stormwater plan. So, and hopefully that will sit there and say, okay, well, we've from a SCOSA perspective, we've recognised the problems, we're addressing the problems, and we've actually can demonstrate that we've actually gone a fair way to actually making and positioning ourselves going forward. We can't change the past, unfortunately, but that position is actually reflected in the report that we get from the SCOSA as well. Yeah,
as long as they line up the two reports.
Yeah,
and you can say, well, we've already self-discovered.
So we're self-discovered. We're addressing it, and from that perspective. So
yeah. The question I had, David, was with the other reviews that you've done at other councils, how are we sort of benchmarking and how are we positioned?
You're in that very interesting in between, semi-metro, semi-regional space.
Yep.
I think, you've got big aspirations and you've got that restraint of small community, unfortunately. I think I am seeing a fair mix, and the biggest point I really be able to comment on is that asset renewal ratio. So I've got a massive pool of data from both my external and internal audit world in that regards, because it's an indicator of that sustainability and your maintenance life. I'd say you're a little bit, your asset data is a bit old. I'd say you're certainly not falling right through to the bottom, but you're on, if I took that midpoint, I'd be on that slightly older side for a lot of clients that we're seeing. But again, the further out we go from metro, the worse it gets. So that's probably the biggest issue, and I think that's having a massive impact on your data and your decision making. So yeah, you're certainly not stellar. But the plans that are coming, that updating of data, you'll actually be able to make some really smart decisions. It won't be a long turnaround. And so, in full support of the conversation that you're having with Sharon just then, it won't take a lot to actually switch that around quite quickly. And I think the other big thing, and you are no different to most councils, to be quite honest, is you're overspending on your new, and which is putting you in underspending on your renewal, right? It's a real common issue. I mean, down at Victor Harbour, where I am the chair, I have a camera in my face saying this, so it's available in the public record, that they are grossly overspending on new assets all the time.
Yep.
It's not an uncommon thing. Unfortunately, it just needs to be corrected.
Yep. Okay. Yep. No, it's good that it's been identified, and we can take it on board. All right, are there any other questions in relation to the Excosa report? Christine?
Just a comment, when I was reading it, I felt quite comfortable because all the recommendations that are rated as high, staff already knew about them and had already started doing something about them. And for the other ones, the mediums, we have discussed those. And so by the time we get back here in November, I'm looking forward to seeing the responses on the mediums as well.
Yep. Very good. Councillor Shanks?
Yeah, thank you. Just, I guess, provide a little bit of a brief update to the rest of the panel members. Our information briefing, I think, was quite constructive in the chamber. What I've noticed in the past is lack of information gets filled with misinformation. And, you know, some elected members, and I'll put my hand up straight away, frustrations in the past is seeing these things but not being armed with the data that is needed to point out these things. These processes, as I sort of stated, I think last meeting, Excosa reviews, Excosa readiness reviews is nothing to be intimidated by, because if you have an appetite to fix any problem, you need to know what the problem is. And I think I did make the point in regards to, you know, just, I think I used the term cooking the books just to look good, you know, which I caution taking what I'm saying with a grain of salt, but I don't have any other way to put it. But I think it was more about how we look on our financial ratios to why our financial ratios look the way they look.
Yep.
And that appetite in trying to, you know, notice where we've learnt from things that worked and things that didn't work is leading us through the process. But it all starts with that appetite of wanting improvement, and what I'm liking and what I think some of my colleagues in the chamber are liking are the things that are being identified. Some are intimidated by it, some get intimidated by change. But in the end, you are not there to convince everyone. You are merely just there to provide the data, and how they interpret it, how they use it is going to be entirely up to them. But I think this, paired with the budget process, which we'll talk on more tonight, is about that openness and saying, hey, these are the reporting standards that we are currently working towards as an organisation and we expect to provide you. And it is being substantiated with David Papper and his team. And that information briefing was that initial cross-pollination of education, I guess, that really broke down barriers that I think have been handicapping this organisation, in my honest opinion, to date. So, yeah, I just wanted to give a little bit of a take on how that information briefing, albeit before this meeting, happened before this meeting. It was quite beneficial, I believe.
I think it was a good report, how we could see with the benchmarking, you know, what we were assessed against and the results of each of the assessment and whether it was reportable or not. So, you know, very, very easy to read. Are there any other questions, comments in relation to the Excosa report? And if we go back, we've got three attachments for this item. The first one is the internal audit action plan. Were there any comments on the internal audit action plan? Do you want to talk to it, Christine?
I've just scribbled down page 109. It's to do with the obligation register. Evidently the LGA has just completed something. But there was a comment in there that someone's previous council tried to do it and the job was too big and they sort of gave up. So I'm just wondering, is the LGA register useful, and are we thinking that we can put one together here, or are we thinking it's too big and too hard?
Sharon?
So I think we will try, the plan is to actually try and do something, as long as it's not too onerous, in the sense that we're spending a lot of time just reporting for the sake of reporting rather than actually responding to I suppose, the things that matter and the things that we actually be aware of. Unfortunately, from a governance perspective, we haven't actually had enough time. There's been quite a few things that have been happening in the governance space that haven't provided the opportunity to spend the time and looking at the LGA. I think the issue with the LGA, and I think this is an indication of how complex the matter is and how do we adequately respond, is that the LGA took 3 years to actually come up with that register. So I think that we understand the need to do it, because obviously, the council has no risk appetite for non-compliance, which it should, the appetite should be quite low. But again, we don't want to actually sit there and say that the response is making work that we're actually not achieving. We're spending so much time trying to keep it up to date that we potentially could be missing those non-compliances as well. So it's just that balancing act.
To be assessed.
Yes. And I agree with that. I've done a review with a former employer, and you can take it to the nth degree, and that's just not practical for anyone. So I think it's getting that balance right, and just getting it done, sort of, get the review done. But, it's amazing. If you get someone legal and with the compliance, I mean, all the acts that, council has to follow is just insane. So I think it's, applying sort of, your risk appetite and ranking them and just working out, well, what are the high risk items that we need to cover off on. So, yeah. All right, were there any other comments on the action plan? No, all good. And then jumping to the third item was the we had the scope, didn't we, for the next one that's currently underway? Has it started, or?
Yeah, it started this week, didn't it, David? I think it started yesterday.
So through to Chair, we actually have kicked off this audit, economic development strategy implementation from Monday.
Cool.
So this audit, we will focus on the implementation of the strategy and consider the allocation of the resources. And we will interview the key people from the two relevant development groups to understand how they interpret the obligations in the agreement, how they report to council regarding the implementation status. Focus on the cooperation between the council and these two groups. We just kicked off this audit.
Yep. Very good. No, it looks very interesting. It'd be interesting to see the report when it's produced. Were there any questions or comments on that scope document? All pretty straightforward. Sorry, Councillor Shanks.
Sorry, just to confirm, we're talking about the economic development strategy?
Yep,
Yeah. So just a quick high-level comments, if I could.
Go.
I've always noticed it's a bit of a catch-22 here in the town of Gawler. I think we all acknowledge that our residential ratepayers are our main revenue, but our commercial rates are where we actually make money.
Yep.
And our mix, realistically, if we want to make money to then reinvest, our commercial rate mix is what we need.
Yep.
That said, our residential rate revenue and how we operate and the like, to be able to justify an economic development manager,
Yep.
You need to be able to provide the return on investment above all the core functions of what councils need to give. So we have seen the budget bid put up in the past. We didn't see it again this cycle, because I think the realisation of fundamental services took that core path, which we do appreciate, I'm sure, in the chamber. But I am attracted to this scoping and this additional work, because providing a business case on ultimately driving more commercial investment and what that looks like is a must on a strategy moving forward, because realistically we want the same, we'll just keep doing the same, but we need to look at this a little bit differently, and that economic development is I think one of our big saving points. So I'm looking forward to watching this process step through, because it is empowering the decision makers to be able to turn around and go, this is why we need this resource, and then that's it.
And I think it links well into the internal controls work, saying that we haven't really explored other revenue options. So, you know, it's up to Bentley's to recommend what is possible, and then we can assess, you know, what we think is, you know, makes commercial sense and what doesn't. But you know, it'd be interesting to see the outcome. All right. Are there any other comments or questions on the item 7.1, the internal audit work plan update? No? Not? Have I got a mover? Christine, seconder? Peter? All in favour? Carried unanimously. All right. Thank you, David and Donju, for joining us. Yeah, we look forward to your next meeting and your next report.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for moving us early. Much appreciated.
Anytime. All good. Enjoy your evening.
You too. See ya.
See ya. All right, so if we go back. So we've got back to item 6.1, which is the FY24 Audit and Risk Committee Annual Report. And we've got an officer's recommendation that the Audit and Risk Committee, having considered and endorsed the FY24 Audit and Risk Committee Annual Report as contained in Attachment 1, recommends to Council that the annual report be adopted. Did you want to make comment on that, Sharon?
Through the Chair, so this is a legislative requirement that the Audit Committee must do an annual report to the Council each year. So there's nothing, the legislation doesn't necessarily specify what are the format of it, as what the matters should be included in that annual report, and obviously majority of it is on what are the matters that have been considered and the potential. I'll take it as read and happy to make any adjustments or things that you don't consider appropriate. And obviously we've got we've actually completed the full work plan as well.
Yep.
In relation to that, so it actually also adds the extra detail should the Council want it as to where it's actually sitting within the terms of reference and the requirements under the Act that the Audit Committee is responsible for.
Yep. Any questions, comments? And what we've done is we've included the chairperson's comments in the report, so I'll just quickly read those out because it sort of summarises everything for the year. So the Audit and Risk Committee's activities for FY24 summarises the work of the committee for the past year and the continued focus on risk and assurance within Council and the various reports from the external and internal audit. A key focus of the Audit and Risk Committee continues to be reviewing the financial performance of the Council to ensure the Council returns to an operating surplus position and reduces its reliance on debt of fund operations. The financial strategy of Council must continue to focus on balancing the needs and desires of the community with the long-term financial health of the Council. To become financially sustainable, the current financial landscape must be at the forefront of Council decisions as it undertakes the review of its long-term financial plan. The importance of a robust long-term financial plan which guides the Council on its journey to financial sustainability cannot be underestimated. As a result, the Audit and Risk Committee worked with Management and Council to consider the assumptions and endorse a budget appropriate for a growth council during a period of high inflation that adequately services the local community both in the short and long term. The committee has also worked closely with management in building the risk management maturity of the Council. I would like to acknowledge the professionalism and active participation of the Audit and Risk Committee during the reporting period. The level of discussion on matters brought before the committee has been of a very high standard, which I believe has resulted in tangible benefits to the community and council. The committee has also greatly benefited from the contributions of the Mayor and Council committee members who bring significant local knowledge and local community experience to meetings. I would like to thank Councillor Paul Kosh for his contribution to the committee during his appointed term and welcome Councillor Nathan Shanks to the committee. I wish to record my appreciation of the work undertaken by council management and staff in supporting the work of the committee, including the commitment and involvement of Mr Andrew Goodsell, Acting Chief Executive Officer. I would also like to record my appreciation of the high standard of financial and internal control reporting provided to the committee by Sharon Perkins, Executive Manager, Finance and Corporate Governance, and the dedicated finance and governance teams. So thank you, everyone. Everyone's efforts really appreciated, and as you can see from the work plan, we have achieved a lot. It makes you tired just looking at it. Awesome. If there's no other questions or comments, I'll I'll ask for a mover for the recommendation that we endorse the attachment 1. Peter? Sorry. Oops, hang on, just put your microphone on. It's not. Push a button. Yep.
On page 10, it says during July 2024, the committee undertook a self-assessment. Should that be 2023 or is it? It's not prospective, is it?
Yep.
So I just need to change that.
Karen?
So I would say it's actually this meeting, because I think that this is actually the last meeting that of your 23-24 work plan. So the work plan actually operates from October. So October's your first meeting and your July's the last meeting. That's why I've said it's in July. So this is the meeting where you wrap everything up. So from that perspective as well. So that's why I said it's for, you've done it at this meeting for the past 12 months. So that that terms of reference and that self-assessment is this, you're doing it at this meeting and in consideration of this report for the past 12 months.
Yep, makes sense. Okay. All right, happy with that? Yep. All right, so do I have a mover for 6.1? Yep, Christine, and a seconder, Councillor Shanks. All in favour? Carry unanimously. All right, item 6.2 is the draft FY25 Audit and Risk Committee Work Plan, and the officer's recommendation that the Audit and Risk Committee adopt the FY25 Audit and Risk Committee Work Plan. Sets the ordinary meeting dates of the committee for the next financial year as the 5th of November 24, 4th of February 25, 6th of May 25 and 15th of July 25, and notes that subject to the FY25 budget timetable, a special committee meeting will be called during March 25 for the purposes of reviewing the draft FY26 budget. Yeah, we just need to... Yeah. Good work, Anna. So those numbers aren't right. So yes, we just made a quick correction there. Are there any questions or comments on the, I can't believe it's, the FY25 work plan, Christine?
Just one comment. The November meeting is Melbourne Cup Day. I'm not sure if that's going to be an issue for anyone.
I think we did that this year, didn't we? Weren't we on Melbourne Cup Day? Yeah. No. Yep.
You might make a note that I've actually pushed out the July meeting. The reason for that is that with the council adopting the budget in the last week and the committee meeting in the first, it's actually quite a big turnaround and really quick to actually get the reports out. So I do take that's actually a selfish decision on my part, because from the team's perspective, it's really hard to do that churn in a week.
Yep, and I think that's fine because it's audit committee season, so it probably helps space out other meetings as well. just a comment I wanted to make is that if we do need a special meeting before the 5th of November, depending on how this SCOSA review goes and the asset management, like the valuation and, or, you know, the review of asset management plans, we'll be, you know, happy to be advised as to whether we need to meet before November, because that seems a very long way away. All right. There's no more questions or comments. Yep, sorry, Councillor Shanks.
I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation and I'll speak to it if
Yep.
that's okay. Yeah, look, I think it's a matter of process to set our formal meetings, and we definitely need to. I'm heartened to hear about the special audit and risk meeting should then the need arise, and I think that is good to table.
Yep.
And in addition, I'm sure the invites will be extended through to this committee for information briefings and the like, that I think we can all agree has been mutually beneficial.
Yep.
To the committee and also the chamber. The other thing I do like as well, just picking up on in the officer's recommendation, just picking up on that risk component that I know we did discuss in a previous meeting, updating the terms of reference to, I guess, have that targeted focus, because, you know, as members know, changing from just the audit committee to the audit and risk, I think local government as a whole is probably playing a little bit of catch up, but we do rely and have that expertise in the room, so the terms of reference being updated to actually capture that usage, and I say usage with the utmost respect, but I think, yeah, I just think it is a quick positive action from staff, which we should appreciate, and I look forward to reading that terms of reference should it come up to council, and hopefully some feedback is sought from this committee and at least the chair as well moving forward.
Cool, thank you. So I've got a seconder for 6.2. Peter, all in favour? Carried unanimously. So we go down to 6.3, which is the policy review. So we've got the officer's recommendation that the following policies be adopted. So the rate rebate, debtor management and financial hardship, and also note that the CEO be authorised to make changes of a minor or technical nature to the policies adopted by council. Did someone want to speak? Renee, did you want to speak to them? Yep.
So the rates rebate policy and the debtor management policy and the financial hardship policy have all gone through a really thorough review this year. The focus of the review was to really refine the content to focus on the policy purpose and improve the readability of the application and assessment processes that are associated with it, and also to remove policy sections which really are just recite pieces, large pieces of legislation, which is not necessary. So I'll take the report and the draft policies as read, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Yep. Thank you. Christine?
I was happy with the substance of all the policies. Just detected a few typos and things, so I can just, I can just let you know. I'm not going to read them out.
That's what Christine does, just to prove that she's read every word. It's just the challenge, just the Easter eggs in there. Are there any other comments or questions on the policies, Peter?
One comment, I suppose, is in section 3.8, I think it was, of the debt management policy. I just want to make the point that rates are generally very, very rarely written off, and so sort of having a sort of a write-off clause with it that someone might read and think, oh, I might be able to get my rates written off. That very, very rarely ever happens, and it maybe some words could be put in there to sort of express that. The other comment was on the financial hardship policy. It takes out the word rates from the title, but everything you read within it is about rates. So I just wondered about that. I mean, if there's a hardship around parking fines or dog fees or whatever, how is that addressed in terms of a policy framework? So maybe you've got some comments about that.
Yep, Renee?
Sure. So, yes, with your first point regarding debtor management and the write-offs, absolutely. We would rarely ever be a write-off of rates. The wording in this section actually hasn't really changed from the previous wording of the policy, and it generally goes to the sundry debtors rather than the rates.
We can include a reference to section 182, which talks about remission and rates.
Oh, sorry, say that again.
We can include a reference to section 182, which talks about the remission of rates and I suppose those requirements and all that sort of stuff in there, to actually close off on that point that you're actually making, because there are some conditions around the remission of rates in the Act.
Yep.
So we'll just make a reference to that
And
as
I think,
well.
and if you say that, all other avenues have been explored, and then this is kind of last resort.
So from that perspective as well. So
Cool. All right.
And the remission of rates is actually covered in the financial hardship policy. So that's, but I take your point. We'll make those just minor amendments. And in regards to the financial hardship policy, it's really just that, from all the different policies I looked up in reviewing this one, none of them have entitled rates. It just says financial hardship, and everything within it is about rates. So rates is.
I think to take your point, because we're referring to ratepayers all the time, so maybe we just need to change that word to be a bit more generic rather than just talking about ratepayers. Because I think, is that where you're referencing? It's always ratepayers that we're referring to, and that's the reference to rates.
Yeah, we're just reading it. It is about rates. I mean, but what if someone else who hasn't got a rates issue? Where's the policy relating to that? It just seems. It just seems a bit funny to take off the rates title when you were actually talking about rates, but then maybe there's some other processes for other types of debts.
So other types of debts are covered by the debtor management policy all the way through, and it's just that so the debtor management policy applies to rates as well, but that's for financial difficulty. We're saying there's a difference between financial difficulty and financial hardship. But we can put the rates back in the title if that. Yeah, and the policy is really clear, I guess, in the scope. The intent of the financial hardship policy is that the scope says the policy applies to all rateable assessments within the council area. So it applies to rates. It's not intent. There's no intent with it to apply to any other types of debt owed to council.
All right, Councillor Shanks.
It is interesting, I guess, learning through the process of policies and the amount of policies we need in local government to clearly identify our position on any given item, any given service, and the like. I think these draft policies are fine, are good. I guess that the real test that I've noticed is when a ratepayer might feel hard done by, and then the use of the policy, whether it's a hard and fast, the policy clearly identifies this as clearly as I interpret it, or we can use this policy to assist. So some of the language here is, I think, allows both, which from a business point of view protects the business.
Yep.
But then the potential of a ratepayer slipping through could also be there, but there isn't any wording here that I can recommend avoiding any of that because these are needing to be tested and true. So any feedback I give is, you know, I think you guys have done a good job. We constantly should be reviewing these things. The real test will be, should they need to be used? And I think it will be good to provide a little bit of feedback once they go live, that the tests that may come and how they're operating would be a real good piece of information moving forward.
Yeah.
Some of the things I did like as well, reading through them, was I like the definition of the people that talk about payment plans, because it actually suits their own personal budgeting and the option that's there, opposed to going on a payment plan because you've missed payments. I think that's an important modern day thing to be picking up. You know, my wife and I choose to go on a payment plan across all our services that we pay for because it is easier to budget. You know, fortnightly payments and the like, we can actually manage them better. That's just how it works for us.
Yeah.
So yeah, breaking down the barriers in the language of actually asking to just set one up actually prevents the risk of them not getting paid each quarter because they come as bill shock.
Yeah.
So again, that's what I like about some of the language in that review, and it has been picked up. It isn't just a arbitrary review. It's, hey, let's look at this through a modern lens, which credit where credit's due. I just thought I'd put that out there. So yeah, I look forward to, I guess, testing our shareholders, our customers, our ratepayers in how these policies protect us to protect them, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And well done, Renee, because so many times we see the policy reviews and there's a few words changed here and there, and I like how you've considered them, you've made substantial changes, you've, you know, got rid of any duplication of words and that, so well done. Like, you've done a thorough review, so that's really, really good. And in practice, I mean, you've always got the reputational risk. I think there was a council last week that had to sell some of the properties to recoup rates, and I mean, that's your last resort, but, you know, that's, if you follow the policy, you know, that's what happens. So as long as we've got it in writing and it steps through and it walks through okay, and as you said, it tests in real life, then, yeah, that's, you know, that's the best way to manage it, in my mind. Okay, so that's 6.3 for the policy review. If there's no more other comments or questions, do I have a mover? Peter? And a seconder? Christine? All in favour? Carry unanimously. Okay, item 6.4 is the Northern Adelaide Waste Management Authority budget review for FY24. We have the officer's recommendation that we receive and note the Northern Adelaide Waste Management Authority budget review for the FY24 financial year, and then we recommend to Council that Council writes to, Norma? Advising that pursuant to Part 2, Section 25, Part 3, Subsection 3 of the Local Government Act, budget reviews will result in an amended budget will be provided to constituent councils for endorsement prior to adoption by the Norma board. So basically, my understanding is they amended the budget, but we weren't notified about it.
Yeah, essentially. So why they would actually provide us copies of minutes, of the board minutes, where the normal board considered, but they wouldn't be specifically asking us to endorse it before the board actually adopted the recommendation as per the requirement of the Act. So
yep.
It's probably been an oversight. I don't know why, but so yeah. So that's just something that's been picked up that we'll write to Norma and GRFMA, which is exactly the same. Just to remind them that they need to seek endorsement from the constituent councils before they adopt the budgets.
Councillor Shanks.
I'm glad we just got a little bit of a verbal there, because I read this, and this is no offence to you, Erin, at all, but I read it, and I read it, and I read it, and I go, Is the Audit and Risk Committee telling council that we need to tell off Norma because we have an outstanding RFI that they haven't answered?
No.
And I kept on going around in circles. So I then, I'm actually a proxy member of the Norma board. I actually rang the CEO of Norma.
Yeah.
And I said, what am I missing?
Yeah.
You know, what am I missing here? I guess for me, if it is an oversight of process and we can work through and we can tighten it up, then happy days. I see time go into these reports and the like. And when I queried the CEO on this, I sort of came across a little bit surprised. And to be, the Norma CEO came across a little bit surprised. And you need to, again, take this with a grain of salt because I probably didn't do it justice in the explanation. I just probably went in and said, hey, have you not sent something you're supposed to here regarding budget, et cetera, et cetera. But where we did arrive, and this is where we might have been confused and it might have been a completely different item, but Toby was under the impression that something was requested in regards to this level of topic, and they went out and got some legal advice, and any amendments of budget of a minor nature was recommended that delegated authority through the board. And yes, we provide updates on the decisions, but because they're minor, if we had to report back on every amendment that went through running that business to our constituent councils of every, all the way through, that would then hinder our ability to keep on going. We'd spend so much time writing reports.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to, I guess, bridge that gap in seemingly a communication breakdown. Not accusing anyone. I think it'd be great just to put everyone in a room and understand the expectations from Norma and council and who's interpreting the Act, and is it crystal clear and we're all on the same page, or is there a little bit of ambiguity and their lawyers are interpreting it this way and our lawyers are interpreting that way, and in the end we might see the same recommendation in 12 months' time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, sorry for my rambling there. I just, and again, no.
Sharon.
Through the chair. So I will make comment in relation to that. So I think I suppose there is an issue is to sit there and say that the Act is pretty clear, to sit there and say that they need to amend it. And I agree that to sit there and say, so if the regional subsidiary is actually not amending the bottom line, because obviously that's what we actually have to take up. So, if they're making an adjustment to sit there and say I'm underspending wages but I'm overspending materials, but my bottom line is actually still the same, because that's actually how it's actually impacting us as well, as to when it's those sorts of budget adjustments. I don't think that they actually need to write back to us to sit there and say that they've actually amended the budget. Whereas, I suppose, because what we should be doing as a constituent council, so in our budget reviews, we should actually be taking into account these things as well. And if we're not made aware of what's actually happening, that effectively you've gone from a 1.3 million to a $1.3 million deficit to a $1 million deficit to $900,000 to a 1.04. That is, they might not consider it material in their context of their perspective, but realistically changing that position, it is a fair amendment, because I suppose how are they going from a $1.3 million deficit to a $1 million deficit as what they're actually doing. So I think within the bottom line, if that's immaterial, from that perspective, yes, I agree, that's probably not of value, but they're required to do the reviews. So I don't think we're actually creating an additional reporting requirement on the regional subsidiary, but we're actually then effectively how we doing our obligations with respect to an owner in providing that oversight to making sure that the investment from a council's perspective, if we're actually not getting the information from that perspective. So I think that, and I understand where that legal advice has come from. It's to sit there and say, okay, have you materially changed? And that's, I would sit there and say, if it's within the operating surplus or the operating result is the same, that should be fine. But when you're actually making significant changes to that operating result, I think that that's actually an amendment that should be reported back to say that you are actually amending your budget. That needs to come back to the constituent councils officially, not just through the provision of the minutes through the board, through the board member who is on that NORMA, who is actually a member of the NORMA board in a different capacity, as opposed to being a council member or as a constituent.
And just a quick question before we go to Councillor Shanks is it Councillor Kosh is a board member of NORMA? Have we got
Councillor Lorna and Councillor Solomon and the CEO.
So we've got three.
So we've got three people, but they're board members, but they're not. They're at the board member of NORMA, not council members, not council representatives. If you know what I mean, that distinction.
But they'd be sitting on there with Gawler's interest in mind. I'm just thinking to make sure that
Well, they should be sitting there with Norma's interest in mind.
Yeah, no.
Not Gawler's interest in mind, and that's the distinction, and why that information has to actually officially come back to Gawler, the council, as the constituent, as the owner. Of that perspective. So it is that thing of, if they're not changing their operating surplus or operating result, I don't see that that's actually a budget amendment. But when they're making those changes, I think that to meet that obligation of amending their budget, they need to actually report back to constituent councils in writing a letter to say, here's a budget, do endorse it.
Councillor Shanks.
The line of conversation you just started down is one we've been banging our head against the wall in relation to being a NORMA member, being a representative of Gawler, however, needing to put that representation aside and focusing on the business of NORMA, yet it's our business and NORMA does well, council does well, and vice versa. And then the nonsense of elected members needing to declare an interest of a material sense and leaving the room when we discuss anything NORMA, even though they're the best people that are positioned to be able to update their colleagues on NORMA related items. But I could bore you with the frustrations with that I'm sure Sharon and I would fill you in on all that. But just on that, and again, I really appreciate the elaboration on the report and what we're requesting. I would love to make a suggestion before we send a formal letter, because with all due respect, whatever formal letter that comes from council in council plain English, I say in inverted commas, I think will not hit it as home as what you just did by talking it through in person. And I get the feeling that the CEO of NORMA would really appreciate that ability to be able to go, hey, what are we missing here? What are you finding clear that we're not? How can we provide it to you, and when will we provide it? Because that initial conversation, I think, will save a lot of process, and then the letter will merely just be a backup. Just some, some feedback there, because I think you can save yourselves a lot of time in just having that conversation and then following up with that official letter, if that's the process we need to do, noting staff's time and how swamped you guys are, the avoiding of reports and the like. Obviously, I'll always try to back you to show how we can get around that.
I hear what you're saying, but I suppose also as staff, our responsibility is actually to the council and to protect the council, and this is a compliance issue, from that perspective. So, yes, we can sit there and I'm more than happy to ring NORMA to sit there and say, okay, well, this is our expectation of you complying with the legislation, but writing reports and making sure that the audit committee and the council is meeting their obligations and aware of those responsibilities is a responsibility of us as a staff member. And to write a report, to sit there and say we've received this and this is the change, it's not necessarily, I think it's a small price to pay or part of our role to ensure that we're actually meeting, I suppose, addressing the risks and understanding where we're at with regard to the, I suppose, the whole operations as well. So.
Okay. Peter?
Thank you, Chair. I find a bit of a conundrum, and I think the law is an ass sometimes, and this is an example, I think, in that, the problem you have of setting up a board with staff and all the rest of it, and all the regulations that they have to comply with as part of that. And then to make this effective, you've got at every quarter or whatever, they've got to send you something that you can include in and the timing is all wrong. And it just takes time for them to do their review, to send it over to you to absorb it. You've gone past your own budget review probably, and then, it would make much more sense for, presumably you have some staff member within the council who would receive these things from, well, if they don't, then they probably should, so that they could manage their budget within your accounting system and report through to your reviews. That would be an easier way for it to work. But the law is not written in that way that you can do it. You sort of almost, when you read it, you almost say, well, I have to say something about it. But I think it's a conundrum that's in with a lot of councils that have got regional subsidiaries, and I don't know that they actually, deal with it particularly strictly in this way. So I tend to agree with Nathan that it needs a bit more, maybe a bit more work. Maybe, I don't know if there's any legal opinions. I'm sure people have come across it before, and it needs to sort of, at the end of the day, maybe the legal act needs to be changed to make it read better. But at the moment, it's like knocking your head against the wall, I think, in terms of bureaucracy of it all.
I'm aware of probably the advice in relation to what's defining as an amendment of the budget, and that's where it is that if you're moving things around and you're still actually reporting the same operating surplus, those shuffles, it's like if you're managing to the bottom line, if you change a budget, that's not necessarily a reportable item, but I suppose it's when you're actually going to have that change in that bottom line, which then potentially has that impact. I think is that as how that legal advice in the past has actually been provided.
Well, I think it would be very rarely that a review doesn't change something of the bottom line, and it's a question of more materiality, I guess, than anything. But you're always going to change the bottom line, I think, in most cases. But anyway.
Right. Yep. Okay, so we've got the officer's recommendation up there. Did you want to add? Sorry, Councillor Shanks.
Yeah, look, I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation. I would just like to provide a few closing comments. I think good discussion had. Always appreciate the back and forth, because that's where we can learn the most. I guess the point I was really trying to nail home is, what is the reason? What is the outcome that we expect? What is it we want? Absolutely, I agree with Peter. In a perfect world, we would have live feeds and we'd see that business data being injected into ours, and it would happen all automatically to be able to give us those live feeds, and we'd report on those live feeds. But what is the second best thing? Is that what we want to be able to see? Is that a relationship building that we need between our one of our senior accountants here we have in the town of Gawler, that they physically go down to Norma and talk to them, or vice versa. What is the outcome? What is it we want to achieve in the end of all this? Because in the end, we've picked up a non-compliance item that I think there's a little level of ambiguity, judging by the way that the CEO of Norma responded to my question. And again, probably the way I also asked it. But I was lacking anything else other than this report. Great report. But again, what is the outcome we want so that we avoid having to report on this again and again and again and again? And is that meaning opening the can of worms in an advocacy role as well, which we put up a hand on for as council, as Peter rightfully pointed out? Is this tripping us over on us getting the outcome, doing our job? Yeah. Because in the reality of all this, the subsidiaries that exist, and Norma especially, is a business that we are a third owner of. And by doing it and by making that commitment to taking on that third of that business, we have responsibility, but we have a lot of benefit that we can show in our bottom lines because of what we've saved on our waste management and the like. So we want that to keep on going. We want to maximise that. So if we've got some information that we need to request to ensure we're reporting on that, you know, let's work that through. Yes, absolutely, report to us, because I agree it's your job and council's job and council staff's job to do it. But I also believe it's council staff's role to seek any areas of improvement that we can.
I think it's a matter of them, you know, through this letter, like through the phone call and the letter. I mean, because that's the requirement by the law is to provide us with their budget and any material amendments to the budget. If I remember right, and you might be able to correct me, Peter, a few years ago, we weren't even reviewing the Norma budget. I think there was a time that, you know, it wasn't brought to our attention. So this is, you know, we've taken huge steps. So I think it's just keeping that line, as you said, keeping the line of communication open and just so there's no surprises to our bottom line, because we do own the business. Sorry, Peter.
I think we've always had at some point the budget submitted to the council, and often it's come through the audit committee as well. But reviews, I've never seen a review come through here, and it may be, you know, doing it more informally and having a chat to Norm. Maybe they could actually resolve this by getting some form of legal opinion on it. I'm sure there's probably one already written, or a number of them are probably already written for similar situations, but just pointing out what the Act says and how that can be managed sensibly in a business-like way, may be worth getting some more knowledge around that. They may be able to do that because if they're doing it for us, they've got to do it for all the other councils as well.
Exactly.
So I think it should be sort of softly managed, if you like, and then see what comes out of that.
All right, agreed. Okay, so Councillor Shanks has moved it. Have I got a seconder for item 6.4? Peter's seconded. All in favour? Carried unanimously. All right, then we've got another one at 6.5, which is the Gawler River Floodplain Management Authority and the budget reviews for FY24. The officer's recommendation is that we receive and note the budget review, and we once again recommend council to write to the Gawler River Floodplain Management Authority saying that, you know, we need to be advised of their amended budget prior to the adoption, prior to them adopting their budget. Has there any comments, Christine? Are you going to move it? Do you have any comments or questions, Councillor Shanks?
Oh, yeah, just quickly, it's exactly the same. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. You know, the report was pretty much a copy and paste, not again to take away from the work, because it's the same item. So, yeah, same comments as before. But it is good that we are picking these things up.
Yep, cool. All right, have I got a seconder? Peter, all in favour? Carried unanimously. All right, so then we move on to item 7, which is information reports. We've done 7.1. So 7.2 is the internal controls review for FY24. Did someone want to present on that one?
Erin's ignoring me. Do you want to talk to Erin? You didn't.
Okay, so we're a bit later with this one, comparing it to the external auditor's internal controls review that they did at the last audit. We did have some different scores this time. We slightly reduced our average score, just based on the fact that we took a different approach this financial year, where we not only looked at the controls, but we made sure we actually tested them as we went along. So we were comparing policies and procedures that we've already got written up, and just tried to have a look at any improvements that we could have made along the way, which was really beneficial for everyone. But also we've had a big changeover of staff within the finance department, so we had different viewpoints of the way that we do things, so we were actually able to get some really good feedback, and I guess some insight into how the controls were working, because these new people had to come in and they had to look at our policies and our procedures to make sure that things were working the way that we were saying that they were happening. So we do have the comprehensive reports that everyone's done, and the assessors and the reviewers as well, and their comments that have gone along as an attachment with this report.
Very good. Are there any questions or comments? Christine?
Just got a question. Sometimes there was a 1, 2 or 3 rating in there, and sometimes the people didn't agree, but anyway, let's just say there were some low ratings in there. But then when we go to the task improvement plan, listing all the things that could make things better, everything is listed as a low priority to complete. So I'm just wondering, does that mean we're going to have 1s, 2s and 3s next time because we've decided that they're low risk and therefore low priority? Or were they rated low priority because it's a resourcing issue and you're thinking you're not going to be able to get to it?
Through the chair, Christine. So the internal controls, the better practice model that we use, Control Track, actually rates them for us. So we don't choose whether it's a low, medium or high risk. So that's already done. We do have due dates in there as well. So I think the last one was March 2027. So there may be 1 or 2 on the report for next year, but majority of them we actually want to complete this as in 24-25 financial year. If not, most of them have actually been completed as at 30 June. So a couple of them might have gone over.
It's been a while since I've looked at Control Track, but from my memory as well, as that each of the controls are also risk assessed. Yeah. So they have a risk assessed rating as well. So I think it's actually risk in the sense that, as opposed to a priority, in that sense of this is our priority. So if the controls are all working, it's actually a low risk to us as well, as opposed to it's a low priority. Because I know that in relation to some of the controls that I reviewed that needed an improvement plan, when you completed an improvement plan, it didn't actually give you an option to list the priority of it. It just basically said when's your due date. So I think that's probably just poor wording out of Control Track in the report.
Because I will say I'm not losing any sleep over it, because even though there might have been a few reds and oranges in the same section, they were surrounded by plenty of greens. So I think there's probably compensating controls, and that's why the risk ratings come out low.
Yeah. And from my review, when it was red, it was prepayments or something, there was low risk items, I was happy that they weren't going to be detrimental to the council. So And as you said, on balance, you know, there's way more green than there is red or orange. So I was happy that the controls are in place. So well done. That's a lot of work, and thoroughly done. And you know, like the policy rewrite as well. So well done. You know, you can see that you've thought about it and not just gone and tick boxes. So cool, Councillor Shanks.
Yeah, I've got to be honest, I'm still reading these. It is a heavy read. But I guess I'm just trying to get my head around the language. I'm just trying to get, again, my head around the whys we do it. And I really liked the way they are set out. The prepayment one was an interesting one because I did pick up on that, and that was one of my example questions. I was just going to turn around and go, okay, walk me through, let's take that as an example of what was assessed, why did it end up at a 1, and why do we think we need to do a whole procedure or do a procedure in relation to solving that 1, and can it be picked up in an existing procedure, you know, and again, take my ignorance, you know, that's all this is.
Yeah. Erin, did you? Oh, sorry, Sharon. Which one?
I'll add a general comment in relation to. So from a sector perspective, they've actually gone through and developed this better practice model that actually has identified all the risks and all the controls that we should have in place. So it's probably by virtue and in their infinite wisdom, they've actually legislated the better practice model, which I'll sit there and say I don't know why it actually got legislated, but it has got legislated, so that's fine. So from our perspective is that to actually ensure that we get a good, unqualified external audit opinion on our internal controls, we have to actually effectively have these controls in place, because that's what they're actually assessing on from an external audit perspective. I think personally that there probably is a lot of controls in here that are repetitive, and that we probably don't necessarily need to have as many in place, and maybe that is one of those things about from a prepayment perspective, is there a whole heap of other things in place, other controls that counterbalance, so we don't necessarily need to have that procedure. But I think at this point in time, until we actually have that assessment of are these controls, are we being repetitive on our controls, and are we over-controlled, we probably need to do that assessment, and that's what the assessment was actually taking place. And I don't know what the issue is in relation to the prepayment, so Erin might be able to do that, but I suspect it's just in the strict interpretation of what the control is and what we actually have in place. In a literal interpretation, we probably don't comply.
Through the chair. So I believe that one is just the fact that we didn't have a procedure for it, and the control was, do you have a procedure for prepayment? So we don't have one, so we can't score ourselves 5 because we don't have it. But also because we've got this changeover of staff that we're going through at the moment, and we're trying to upskill new people, we don't have anything physically to give them. So yes and no. It's probably a good thing to have.
So Councillor Shanks, this is that basically the control guide is the Bible. Is, you know, someone in someone from Deloitte that I'm sure Peter knows came up with. Yeah, oh no, I thought it was 13, 8, and then it was revised in 12, and then it was revised in 15. So I used to work with the person that created the Bible, a very pedantic person, but it was great. They said, okay, so if we were going to have a perfect financial control environment, what would it look like? And they went off and they came back with the Bible and went, this would be it. So, but you've got to take into account that the Bible was written a long time ago, before a lot of, the IT controls and systems are in place, that they are, 15, what are we up to? 15 years later. So it's a different environment. So, but when we go to signing off the financial statements at year end, management has to sign off a certification to say that, put our hand on our heart to the auditors that we were happy the financial controls are in place throughout the year. And sort of the, I think it helps with the auditor's insurance that the fact that management kind of have an oversight as to whether the numbers are correct or not. So it's all part of the process. So I think it's okay to have some of the ones because some of the areas it's best practice, and you come down to, like we keep saying, the risk assessment and is it actually worth our staff's time in, I think one of the prepayments was having a list of prepayments. Now I haven't seen a list of prepayments since last century, like, so some of them are pretty archaic, so, but then by signing off on having it in control track, Erin's ensured that she goes, well, this is the Bible, this is every possible control that you could think of for finance reasons. Do we need all of them? No, but at least we know where we stand. And maybe that can be a process going forward, and I did that at a previous employer, is to kind of work out, there is duplication, so work out where the questions are duplicated, where those practices are no longer in place because we now have computers and all that kind of thing. So basically, yeah, it's all okay. You don't have to tick every box.
And I think we've had that discussion amongst ourselves as to sit there and say, rather than, I think when it was, especially when the control track tool came out, I think it was just easier, just let's accept all of them because it was a Bible. Just think about before control track, when the first time I did it, I actually had a piece of paper and we were actually having to update it manually on, and it was a folder about this thick. So I think it is that thing about as the maturity of the team as well, because it is actually a new team, and looking at realistically having that time to look at what our processes are now and are they relevant? Is it relevant, or do we have some counter controls that actually mean that we don't necessarily have that? I still remember the day when I first started and an auditor said I had to actually sign every single general journal that came through, and I'm going, yeah, no, that's not happening, because we have, I suppose, the systems, but we employ people to do that sort of stuff as well, rather than me having to check everything. So I think that there is probably a bit of maturity that we can actually go through and cull how much we actually do assess.
Risk. It comes down to risk. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to move,
Yep.
and I will just provide a couple of comments. Yes, I'm glad we were able to again elaborate on this. What we do in the construction industry, we have an inspection test plan which has every item that you can come across in any construction project ever, and that is a wordy document, but the reality is that although, let's take asbestos as a everyone knows what asbestos is. In a construction project, we on face value go, well, we're not going to encounter asbestos, so the supervisor and the PM might sign off on it and not applicable.
Yeah.
But you don't set up your inspection test plan and remove asbestos completely, because you start digging and you come across asbestos, your controls, what you actually do, should you come across it, needs to be consistent all the way through. So that's what
It's the same.
that's
same
what I see this as in the financial world. But we do review, we do update, and there are new building technologies that come into place. There are new risks that inadvertently come up as we learn, as new technologies come online. So I'm heartened to hear that maturity, dialogue coming through, because absolutely it's all about that. Using the processes that we're mandated to use, but using them to get the outcomes that are beneficial. Because if we have to use them, well, wouldn't we want to get the most out of them? So these controls, I think, although quite lengthy and quite, I'm sure, a body of work, the exercise being now gone through, I think is a perfect time to talk about, hey, if it was up to us, how would we combine some of these?
Yep.
how would we be able to provide a not applicable? How would we, those
and the team
questions?
can do that. I mean, there's been a lot of changeover with the team. I mean, this is kind of our, baseline assessment. And so next year, it'll be a lot, more succinct. So, I'm happy that that's going to be taken into consideration.
Yeah, no, but I appreciate the work. And yes, I understood it. I thought I did, and I'm glad that I was on the right track.
Yeah, very good. All right, so Councillor Shanks moved it. Have I got a seconder? Christine, seconder. All in favour? Carried unanimously. All right, 7.3 is the FY25 adopted budget. The officer's recommendation is that the Risk and Audit Committee notes the FY25 annual business plan and budget considered and adopted by Council at the ordinary council meeting held on the 25th of June 24. Are there any questions or comments before we move? Yep, Christine.
One question, and apologies, you might have discussed all this at the last meeting. Just noticed that the debt levels go above 25 million, which is our current limit, in the budget and in the next year as well. Just wondering, is the LGFA amenable to increasing the limit?
If we stick to the plan, they will be. Yeah, I think while the debt limit is higher, I think fundamentally it will come down to, I suppose, the commitment to the long-term financial plan and from that process as well. So, and I think demonstrate and is that demonstration that they will do, because even though the debt limit's over 20. The 5 million that's currently set, the financial liabilities ratio has still got some headroom from that perspective as well. So I think it's just one of those things that we just need to, I suppose, weather that storm and get that commitment from a council perspective to trying to reduce, I suppose, trying to actually get back into those operating surplus positions so we can actually address that debt reduction. Yeah.
Yep. All right. We did, at length. Any other comments or questions, Peter?
Yeah, I would just like to clarify that the savings target that's in the budget, 4.5%, is that just a lot of money that's been taken out of the budget, if you like, and is to be found during the process of this year, I guess we need to get a sort of an assessment of how achievable it is, but also maybe get some updates during the year as to how we're tracking with that. Yeah.
So some of it is in labour, which we would sort of sit there and say, essentially, while we actually want to have always a full complement of staff, we know that there's going to be times where there's going to be gaps. So some of it will be delivered through that expectation. If we ever get a year that we have no turnover, it would be probably great. And I suppose it is a risk. From a materials perspective, I suppose at this point in time, it's hasn't been specified, because if we actually knew where we were going to identify it, we would have actually built that into the budget, and that's actually going through that service review process, and the discussions that we've actually had with the leadership team to sit there and say, okay, well they're all aware that we've got this savings target, and so it is looking at areas where we can actually deliver on that from that perspective. And one of the key audits or business improvement activities was to create that robust service review framework, so we can actually make sure that we can identify the savings and make sure that they're actually sustainable savings, because that's, as an organisation, that's what we need. We can't get our savings from just not delivering. Yeah. We actually need to reduce our cost base, and that's the whole intent of it. And we didn't have the time to actually identify how can we actually physically reduce our cost base, because obviously we're stuck in, from a lot of the major expenses, we're stuck into contracts and service levels, which we need to review, to sit there and say, okay, well, what service levels can we potentially modify to deliver some of those savings as well as we go through.
I mean, the danger I see is that if you don't find anything by December, you've got a 9% cut to get in the remainder of the year, and so it becomes much more difficult the longer you leave the changes. But I hope so. I think that's good enough. I guess we'll get through the quarterly reviews some update then through that facility. That would be fine, I think. The other comment I wanted to make was in relation to the long-term financial plan schedule. You're probably aware of it, but the finance costs and the depreciation costs are switched around. I noticed that, when we were looking at the budget before, but I thought it was just but when I was looking at this and looking at the finance costs, they sort of looked pretty high and then dropped suddenly, and I thought, they haven't calculated depreciation right. So they're in the wrong line. Okay, that's all. Otherwise, fine. I'm happy to support the recommendation.
All right. So it's moved by Peter. Councillor Shanks.
I think we've had some good discussion in the chamber regarding the budget this cycle. I think each cycle over the term, noting this is the second for this current term, you'll note that it was actually carried unanimously in the chamber, which is one of the first times we've seen that happen, especially certainly in my time as well. I can't speak on behalf of other elected members, but I guess the reason it got my vote in the end is we could get down to the weeds of the projects that I think should happen, shouldn't happen, and the like. But realistically, that's not what we're voting on. We could, elected members have the opportunity to say, you know what, I don't like that project in there, so therefore I'm going to vote down the other $39 million worth of spending that we need to do. I think what gave people like myself the confidence to say, I don't like the rate increase. No one likes rate increases. But what you can do in justifying the rate increase is what empowers you to go out into your constituents and explain the reasoning why, whether or not your ratepayers like it or not is not what your job is. Your job is to be able to provide the reasons. And through this process and through the appetite of that quality improvement, fundamental service delivery, renew, repair, that confidence is coming through, and that admission of saying, hey, realistically, in hindsight, could have we gone back in time? These are the things we would have done differently, but that's a moot point now. Here we are, and what are we going to do to set us up moving forward? This is one mere snapshot of that strategy, and I think that was some of the messaging that came forward as well. We can be accused as council of having too many staff. Let's use that as an example. But even if that is true, which I'm not saying it is, but even if that is true, what you think you can just turn around in one budget cycle and fire a whole bunch? The reality is no. Can you provide a better asset management delivery service without updated asset management plans? Yeah. Can you provide key delivery projects without a long-term financial plan that doesn't link back to how you're actually going to do it? I think that is the tipping point for elected members, because the theme has always been on point, especially this budget cycle. I've noticed it. I think the chamber has found their feet a little bit more. Yeah. Yes, we've got differing of views and whatever else, but I think overall we're using that to our benefit, and providing a more robust process. There's definitely room to improve, as there always is. But the appetite there needs to be from the elected body through the organisation, and we are seeing that come through. You asked the perfect question in, how are you going to find that savings? Sharon answered it perfectly. I don't know. But geez, we're motivated to find it. You know, that is what we're seeing. That is the difference in being able to support a budget or not at a high level. We're going to provide feedback on how projects go on an isolated spend. That's just all part of it. But that doesn't undermine what my comfort is on the strategic direction we're starting to look at. Because if we look at this budget cycle and the last budget cycle and the ones moving forward, we're at day zero on providing a business plan on how this business is going to succeed, thrive, not just survive. So I'm quite optimistic, realistically, and to be honest, it's the first time in a long time.
It's good to hear.
Not to say that we won't have those hard conversations, but being comfortable enough to have them is what we're providing in this chamber. It's still providing, it's not there yet. We're still working on it, but again, credit where credit's due, because at some point in time I won't be able to give credit, and it's fair and reasonable to give compliment when it is due, because otherwise it undermines when you give only negative feedback.
That's good feedback, thank you. It's good to know that the council supports it fully. All right, so Peter's moved it. Have I got a seconder? Christine's going to second it. All in favour? Carry unanimously. All right, then we've got 7.4 is the asset management plans progress update. So we've got the officer's recommendation that we recommend to council that we receive and note the asset management plans progress update report. Note that 4 draft asset management plans for transport, stormwater, open space and buildings will be presented to the council meeting for endorsement in principle for the purposes of community engagement. And note that a further report on the draft asset management plans will be presented for its consideration following the conclusion of the consultation period. Did someone want to talk to the... Wendy wants to talk to the asset management plans? She so does.
No, I'm happy to talk to it. So through the chair, this is an asset management journey. I think, Nathan, I might echo a little bit of your sentiment there. You know, what we have done in the past is not where we need to be, but I can't stay focused on what we haven't done. I need to be focused on now and what we need to do to change it. And I think when you go back and look at the internal or the Bentley audit recommendations and actions, when you look at the asset management related ones over sort of two years of reporting on that, I'd suggest that the progress has been exceptionally slow. I'm not one to lightly pull that back to resourcing issues. I do think we probably haven't resourced the asset management space well enough, and that remains a challenge when we've got a limited pool of professionals who, in honesty, have been, pulled over to heightened capital delivery in the environment that we've been in, well, really ever since I've started at council. So the last 3 years has been very challenging, but we've done that at the risk of our strategic asset management. And like the line is in the sand that we're not going to have that anymore. So Richard Tang is our infrastructure manager. He and I are working on developing up the strategic asset management plan and really getting that framework. We're not going to do a war and peace version. We're going to do something that is strategic and provides that linkage that we have really been missing properly between the long-term financial plan and that strategic asset management planning and that long-term infrastructure and asset management plan. We're looking more then at those asset management plans. So we have done the transport condition assessment over the last 12 months. We've got the data on that. We've been doing a number of scenarios with the modelling tools we've got available, which has been another thing. We haven't necessarily as a council reviewed and invested in what the asset management tools we need are. So that's something else that Richard and I have been doing, and we've got money in this financial year's budget to do some improvement work there. So we will be presenting the draft transport asset management plan based on that new condition data. The stormwater plan is going to be using the existing condition data. It is outdated, and that isn't up for being done until 25-26. And that is our second largest class of assets. Unfortunately, it's probably the hardest one, again, to get the condition data on. But Richard and I will work through what that will look like over the next 12 months, and we'll base it on what we do know. And we have got some absolutely fantastic input from our ops teams on that, and we sort of bring in 120 years of experience collectively, so that we will use to inform that and get. There's some definite improving in that one. The open space asset management plan. So we have just about finished the brief to go out to do the condition audit. I can't get that done and analysed in time to prepare the updated asset management plan for November. So we'll use what we've got, again, bringing the intel that we've got from the project that we've been doing and our field staff. But once we have done that condition data assessment, and there's a whole heap of analysis, and I do want to do some rationalisation of some of our open space asset. We've never really had a plan for hardscaping, if I'm completely honest, and it causes us issues when we're sort of making decisions on the fly and people want this, that and everything, and we're just not strategically investing, and then our maintenance is going out the window as well. Yep. So we will do basically an out of sync of the 4-year review, legislated review. We'll do the open space one again once we've had that time. And my favourite one, the building asset management plan, the long-awaited 11 years, which makes it 8, what does that make it, 7 years overdue plan. Yeah, that's been a bit of a struggle, if I'm completely honest. And I think Sharon watched me have a minor meltdown when it finally transpired that we weren't going to have this updated draft plan to present. So I've gone back, I have re-scoped the work with our consultant, reset the timeframes, and really reset the underlying principles for what I expect this asset management plan to look like. I am not going to hide that we have got our asset renewal ratio in buildings is appallingly low. And we need to look at some different renewal scenarios in that to present back. So that will be part of what we're doing in the next couple of months. I think, again, then lifting up and again looking at the overarching, this long-term infrastructure and asset management plan. If we go back, what we've been doing is we've had arbitrary caps. And I'm sorry, I'm being quite blunt there again, but we have put arbitrary caps on renewal spending and capital spending, and ironically we have sometimes gone under, quite frequently we've gone under our renewal spending, and we have gone significantly over the new. So that comparison that David was making before in terms of the renew versus new ratios, we really need to address that and get that under control. So there won't be arbitrary caps. It's going to be based as best we can on the condition data. We will link it back to service levels. There's going to be hard conversations in the next 12, 24 months around service levels. Just let's make no bones about it, because there is that is going to be one of the ways we do need to contribute to the savings targets. So I'm laying it out there on the table. It will be interesting to see how council reacts to the updated draft plans and how the community does. I will note that the last time we put plans out for community engagement, I think we got one comment. So in parallel, I'm also going to think about how do we actually do a community engagement strategy that might actually get some people to be engaged and provide comment, because they're the plans that actually guide some of the largest investment that council makes, and ensures the longevity of it's a major input into the financial sustainability long term. So I think the other thing I want to say is that and this comes probably, so there's some major renewals that will come through condition, that be driven through condition data. When we come into new and upgrade, I mean, there's so many different things that people want us to do. So the thorough review and prioritisation of that is critical. That's something exec have been working on, and it's again going to be some very deep conversation around, you know, how do we actually do that new and upgrade when we also are looking at that context of renewal cost might continue to go up because of what's happening in the market. So there's going to be some robust conversation, no doubt. Look, I hope just that little commentary gives you some faith that we have got our attention going in the right direction. For me and Richard, it's like critical path activity for us as the senior infrastructure leaders. And I've got a couple of staff who are coming with some better, in honesty, almost sort of integrated asset management skills. So we've probably been lacking that. And I will also say we've had some fairly archaic processes that are not efficient, just in how we even manage our asset data. So I will, in that strategic asset management plan, have an element of asset management improvement, and that's where, you know, we'll keep our line of sight on that. But yeah, it is going to be continuing to be a journey. I'm not going to try and overpromise because I want to get the fundamentals right, and then we'll keep getting better and better. That's what I'm committed to. Mm-hmm. So, any questions? Happy to take them on board.
Christine.
Will all this asset planning include looking at if there's any surplus assets that maybe could be disposed of or repurposed?
Yeah, through the chair, yes. And as I alluded to in that open space, there's some rationalisation that can certainly happen. That might be a bit scary for some people, but yeah, we do have a surplus. I suspect it might be in smaller assets, so the saving probably isn't necessarily in like the sale or repurposing. It's actually probably going to be in the saving operationally in terms of maintenance and day-to-day ops. That's probably where I'm more focused. But yeah, if we find things that we don't need to have, and I'm not sure. So we've done our playground strategy just recently. That went through council last meeting, got approved. So, for example, in that we actually recommend the decommissioning of three playgrounds over the next 10 to 15 years. So yeah, we are trying to look at that holistically as well. Yeah.
Peter.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's so refreshing to get a very honest and open, because, I mean, we haven't heard the depth of that, the issues that you've sort of referring to, the difficulty of them, which I totally understand. Local government is the most asset-centric beast of a business of any, in the country. It's that's what it is. We don't think of it quite so much in terms of, well, the public don't see it in the terms of the asset, but they just drive on the roads anyway, and they go to the parks and they go to the buildings, but they don't actually think about how all that is a major cost to the organisation, and the horrific cost increases that have come lately, which are swamping through into the depreciation. I would just encourage you to not only look at the engineering side of things that needs to be done, but also the linkage with the financial systems and our planning systems, because that inevitably has to come up and can provide the resources that need to be provided to actually overcome some of these things. And again, that's a good question of Christine's about how we look at assets and whether we can look at them in a different way to get more bang for the buck, either by lower maintenance or disposal or whatever. So thank you for what you've just told us, and be interested to see how the journey progresses. Yeah, so thank you.
Yep. Councillor Shanks.
Peter, I'm glad you picked up on that honesty, because it's the sentiment that I was relating to in the budget. I think Wendy's passion not only comes and provides comfort to elected members, it's clear that she's passionate about her own town as well, which comes through her work, and that really gives us strength in outcomes that we're happy to support, and also query as well. So again, this asset journey that I think Wendy rightfully put it, is what I'm liking, and what I don't begrudge the body of work that is being done in the background, is the lens that we look through in relation to what we have in modern day that we can apply. And I say that in a broad term, but if we want to use an example, we do a multi-level car park in a modern day. Are we going to build that multi-level car park to only house cars? Or are we going to look at a mixed use to see if we have some retail space, some commercial revenue, some opportunities? Do we look at accommodation? Do we look at all the options that are available on that business case on that particular asset to not only accept that we're taking on an asset, but what are we doing to provide a return on investment, whether that be a community outcome, whether that be cash in bank? If we don't look at our assets regularly, if we don't look at our asset plans, if we don't look at it holistically, but then drill into them, then we're never going to come up with these solutions. Because while we're decommissioning 3 playgrounds, we're improving amenity and we're providing better play spaces in other areas. But we're also looking at it saying, we can't afford to do all these at once.
Yeah.
But that's how we're tracking. So what are we doing to avoid that? And playgrounds is one minor example of a bigger asset-based challenge we face. I would almost argue the new versus renew ratio that we're trying to now correct is actually a symptom as well, because now we're getting to a point of some of this infrastructure end of life. Yeah. And we need a new. We need to actually now replace it with new. And while we're doing it, we're going to replace it with modern day expectations, which then attracts modern day costings, appreciation, and the like. So what are we doing to turn around and deliver these things by benefit from modern day technologies? Are we building these buildings to be as green as they can in relation to sustainable building materials, and making sure that they're actually not using as much power as the old building did? You know, simple things like that. Again, it comes back to that appetite. The budget process and even the depot review process that we've been going through this journey, it identified, hey guys, you know how much your asset responsibility went up in the last 10 years, but you know how much your population of staff went down?
Yeah.
It makes perfect logical sense. And one questions, how did we even get to that? And I can feel it, I can see it, that there is a mix between running around and putting out spot fires, as I call them, and letting it burn for a moment so we can strategically figure out what's lighting them in the first place. And it is a balancing act, and that's why poor Wendy is run into the ground, but she's doing such a good job because she can see it. You know, and what she's able to robustly and honestly provide this membership and the chamber is being appreciated by a majority, and hence why that support's coming through, and hence why when we do get all that documentation and with those linkages and with those ideas, we can robustly have those hard conversations. They will be hard. You're not going to get the agreement through the chamber on any given item. And, you know, I might be one of those that I don't necessarily agree with the strategic direction of that particular item, but again, it's that high level thinking, because do the same, get the same.
Yeah.
That's what we're realising, that It's just not going to work. I like the idea of what we're going to put forward isn't going to be the War and Peace, because the only things that helps these actually stick, you plant the seed, you need to water it, is the constant review that this document will be under to catch up with modern day of the future. And if it's a War and Peace, you're doing a review on a document that is not usable operationally, it's just words for words sake. Yeah. We do see that in local government a lot. I'm sure we can all agree.
Yeah, and I think, you know, what you've said before too is that we've got that level of trust now sort of in the chamber, and that, you know, we are sharing the information. I've never seen, like, every asset management plan, you know, I've sat on a number of audit committees, and Peter would be the same, Christine, that everyone looks different. They're all overdue because they're all so long, and people are just so scared that, you know, they're not going to get it right, and, you know, you can't release it because it's not right. Do something different, like, you know, don't do the same thing over and over again. So I support you, Wendy, to, you know, if you want to, I don't know, have a summary at the front, like, you know, the asset management on a page, so then when it goes out to consultation, like, the public actually understand it, you know, in just sort of layman's terms, because I know there's all the engineering and the numbers behind it, the technical stuff, but the, you know, community's not going to understand. They want to know what we're doing. And I really like the fact that, you know, it's come out in a number of times tonight, is I think we're being really honest and open, and I feel like, you know, we're getting the reporting, we're being told the truth, like, you know, that, not the truth, but just it's all, we're actually giving information that we can review and make a decision on, rather than going, oh, it's not quite ready, and, you know, you sort of think, well, where is it? And so you're on the right path, and, you know, it'll be good to see the documents, and don't be scared of them, just, you know, put them out there and see what happens, because that's where you're going to get your feedback. So well done. You just have to be brave, because, yeah, asset management plans just are a challenge for everyone. Cool. No. All right. Are there any other comments, questions? Everyone's happy. We're looking forward to the release. Yeah. Well, and then you just, same with the Bentley's report and the SCOSA is basically, this is where we're at. You know, we're not perfect, but this is our starting point, and we can move forward from there, which I think everyone's supportive of. All right, sorry, Councillor Shanks, last words.
Sorry, I was just going to move the officer's recommendation and just a couple of closing comments. Absolutely. I mean, these are the documents, when they're honest and transparent and robust, that arm elected members to be able to provide the feedback. Again, it's the same theme. And where it's been lacking in the past is too much room for ambiguity. There's too much room for one's personal opinion to fill a space.
Yeah.
You know, it frustrates me. And we're starting to curve that. Yeah. We've still got a lot of work to do. You know, this isn't, once this is done, we're done. as I'm sure Wendy would agree. Yeah. But yes, that plant seed and water it is part of it. So, yep, happy to move the officer's recommendation and look forward to some up-to-date data that will help inform the next budget cycle and the next budget cycle and the next budget cycle.
Exactly. All right, have I got a seconder for that item? Peter seconding. All in favour? Carried unanimously. All right, item 8 is items listed for discussion. There are no items. Item 9 is the questions without notice. No questions. Item 10 is motions without notice. No motions. So therefore item 11, I closed the meeting at 8:58, and the next ordinary meeting being Tuesday the 5th of November 24, 7 o'clock, Melbourne Cup Day. Thank you, everybody.